Hi guys, so I am going to go over some of the characteristics of a covert narcissist. If you're trying to determine whether the person you're with is more of an overt or a covert narcissist, this is pretty much a description mostly based on Sam Vaknin's research and book called Malignant Self-Love. The term covert narcissism was first coined in 1980, and then in 1986, Sam Vaknin labeled another term he calls it inverted narcissism. And they're a bit different than overt narcissists. I'm going to kind of go down the list. I'm going to refer to the notes because most of this is from, like I said, Sam's book called Malignant Self-Love. So the covert narcissist suffers from an in-depth sense of inferiority. They have a really strong propensity for shame. They feel inferior. They are kind of filled with morose self-doubts. They tend to be shy. They tend to be fragile. They are sort of still immersed in that relentless, search for power and glory, but it doesn't include being ostentatious or conspicuous. It's very internal. So you might know one for a long time and have no idea that that's actually what their thinking is, but they have this very grandiose, thinking that they, should be, running the world, or they should be a brilliant scientist, or they should have this amazing life, but they don't necessarily show that. They're very private. It's very internally, this sort of search or this idea, this grandiose idea that their life should be like so much better than it is, right? So they're never satisfied with their life, no matter how good it is. They cannot handle criticism, any type. They're oversensitive to criticism, whether that criticism is either perceived or real. So there's a bit of delusion in their thinking because they can, any sort of critique of them can be perceived as criticism, and they cannot handle it. They also tend to have a really hard time with life difficulties or any sort of setbacks. They are unable to depend on others or trust others. They have a really delusional internal paranoia that everyone is out to get them. They are filled with the chronic envy of others. It's like a corrosive acid that is constantly eating them on the inside. They are never satisfied with their life. They're always envious of other people. If other people have more money or are better looking or have better jobs, but this is very hidden. You might have no idea that this is how they're internally plagued by envy. It's very hidden. So they're very envious of others' talents. They're envious of other people's positive relationships with other people. They think, like if they're with a partner that is very well liked, internally they feel that partner's undeserving of it. They're very envious. They have a lack of regard for generational boundaries or authority. They resent authority. They secretly resent having bosses. They secretly resent having anyone telling them what to do. They may, on the surface, with their mask, be very deferential, but internally they resent it. They refuse to communicate on a regular basis. So they're always, they don't use language to communicate, and they don't communicate on a regular basis. These people tend to they will use silent treatment, or they'll just go mute. They just won't communicate in any sort of direct, honest, authentic way. They tend to be not very goal-oriented. They're kind of besieged by indecisiveness and like a lack of direction. Sometimes they'll hook up with somebody who has a lot of direction, is very goal oriented, so they can sort of go along with that person's goals. But they tend to have these are not people that write down their goals. They're chronically bored. These people are chronically bored. They mimic other people. You will find that they will switch on a dime. They're ready to shift values on a dime. They could be, in one relationship, they could be pretending to be a Democrat, liberal, and then if they get with a new source of supply that's Republican, they'll switch and become a Republican. It's literally like they have no sort of internal compass or no sort of value system that they live by. They're pathological liars, just like the overt narcissist. They tend to have, the coverts tend to have more malignancy. They tend towards more of more malignant. They are moral relativists. These are the people that, unfortunately, a lot of the pedophiles are usually covert narcissists. The ones that have this, nice face on the outside, and then they tend to be, very duplicitous on the inside. They tend to have, you'll find, if there's incest in the family, usually that, that person is a covert narcissist, not usually an overt. They feel humiliated by authority, suggestions, or advice from anyone. They are above that. They feel internally that they don't, that no one is to tell them what to do. They cannot remain in love. Some of the scientists believe that actually covert narcissists, unlike overt narcissists, can fall in love, but they can't remain in love because they have a very impaired capacity to view their partner as separate from them. Their partner is, they look at them as an extension of themselves. They tend to not adhere to social norms or rules. They can be prone to hidden sexual perversions. They definitely rewrite history. They will reinvent history. They will make it something other than it is, just to keep, they'll say, that everything was perfect in their past, nothing bad ever happened to them, everything was fine. They just totally reinvent history. They may secretly feel shame over their grandiose ideas. So these are in a way, they're a little bit more self-aware than sort of the overt narcissist, because they do tend to feel like this, this grandiose mad scientist that believes that he or she is entitled to all of these, power and fame and glory and all this stuff, but they have a shame over that because they know, like, there's a part of them that knows it's very grandiose. They are very ego dystonic. Unlike the overt narcissists, these covert narcissists do not like themselves. They tend to be very shy. They're very perfectionistic. They're filled with uncertainty. They tend to be very moody. These also might have anxiety. They may have anxiety disorders, which is sort of unusual because a lot of times the overt narcissists don't, because they're not neurotic, right? Coverts can tend to be very sadistic. They are ostentatiously modest. It's a very fake modesty. It's very fake because internally they feel very grandiose, but they come across as quite modest. They avoid the limelight. The reason they do this is they are afraid of being outed as frauds, as failures. They are afraid of the limelight because they don't want anyone to see that, who they really are. They have this inability to fulfill their grandiose inner fantasies, which are just totally grandiose. They're paranoid. They cannot trust other people. You might see a covert narcissist, unlike overts, like they might drive a very modest car. They may wear clothes till they're threadbare. They are not ostentatious at all. They tend to be under the radar, and again, ostentatiously modest. But internally, they're plagued by a lot of the same things that the overt narcissist. They have that, internal grandiosity, these fantasies and delusions of power and glory. They feel no matter how good their life is, it is never good enough. They always, feel that they deserve more. They're very entitled. They have this, thinking that everyone is beneath them. You might feel, if you're with a overt or covert narcissist, even though they may come across as very shy and affable and polite, you might feel or get the vibe from them that there's this sort of smug superiority. Like internally they think that they are better than you. You might actually pick up on that if you're intuitive. You might notice that, they can't be bothered to, conversate with the minions. Notice how, they tend to be very, you can feel like a cold disdain or dismissiveness. They're not genuinely interested in who you are as an individual. In the beginning, during the love bombing phases, they are going to study you and find out all the information they can about you so that they can best manipulate you. But once they've figured that out, they're not really curious. They're not curious about your inner life. They're never going to ask what your feelings are or what your thoughts are. They're just not curious. So these are like, the ones that are like, I should be so much better than I am. So, of course, they're insatiable. They can never be satisfied. It doesn't matter what they have. They could have a beautiful wife, a beautiful life, a beautiful husband, beautiful children. They could have rich adventures. They could have financial stability. They could have, a good, solid, wonderful life, but they will never be satisfied with it because their grandiosity and sense of entitlement is so extreme. But again, it's very internal. You really have to get to know these people closely to pick up on the fact that they are chronically dissatisfied, chronically bored, and have this hidden, secret, grandiose life in their internal life. So I hope that helps some, because they're quite a bit different than the overts, and they still have a lot of the same internal thinking, but they look different on the outside, that's for sure. And they tend to have a mask of humility, of kindness, of politeness. They can be very non-assuming, very shy, very vulnerable, very fragile. That is what you see on the surface. So I hope you guys have a wonderful day. I hope these videos are helping, and feel free to like and subscribe. And if you're interested in private coaching to overcome narcissistic abuse or to get out of some of one of these relationships, contact me. I am offering private coaching. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.